All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to unpack an absolutely incredible investigation into ancient South India. We're talking about the rich heritage and early political formations of a civilization whose history is quite literally being rewritten as we speak, all thanks to some really breathtaking recent discoveries. So here is the big question at the heart of our journey today. How exactly did small, localized tribal groups manage to evolve into these highly organized, incredibly wealthy empires? For a very long time, we relied mostly on legendary ancient literature to piece that story together. But today, we're finally bridging the gap between those classic texts and some jaw-dropping modern archaeological proof. Stuff that is pushing the timeline of this civilization way, way further back than anyone ever imagined. Section 1. Tracing the ancient sources. We have to start by asking, where are we even getting all these clues? Well, our history here is essentially built on four distinct pillars. First, we've got inscriptions like the ancient Tamil Brahmi scripts. Then there's a massive amount of physical evidence in the form of coins, and I mean coins from both local rulers and the Roman Empire. Third, we have the legendary Sangam literature, which is this unbelievable treasure trove of over 2,400 poems. And finally, foreign accounts from Greek and Roman writers. But honestly, the most fascinating detail? The rock edicts of the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka from the 3rd century BCE already explicitly reference these independent southern kings. Think about that. These southern empires were recognized by northern powerhouses over 2 millennia ago. Moving on to Section 2, the rise of the Satavahanas. Let's head over to the Deccan region to see a true powerhouse in action. One of our earliest and honestly most massive clues to how the society transformed is the Nanagot inscription. Now you might be wondering, why is a rock carving such a big deal? Because it formally records land grants given to Buddhist monks and Brahmins. This practice of handing out tax-free land completely upended the region's structure. It created a brand new class of people who owned the land but didn't actually farm it themselves, which paved the way for some really complex social hierarchies down the line. We can actually see this power consolidating even further through physical coins, specifically the silver coins of Gautamiputra Satakarni. He was arguably the greatest of the Satavahana kings, and this guy wasn't just wealthy, he was a brilliant military strategist who crushed foreign invaders like the Shakas. And the way we know this for sure is so cool. He actually took the coins of his defeated enemies and, get this, he restruck them with his own royal insignia. Talk about making a statement. All right, Section 3, the Three Great Kings, also known as the legendary Moovendar of the Deep South. The crucial thing to understand here is how power actually evolved to create these legendary kings. It definitely didn't happen overnight. It started right at the grassroots level with the Kijar, who were just local village chiefs. Then, as you moved into the resource-rich hill and forest regions, you had the Valir, who were these much more powerful tribal leaders. Finally, through a mix of conquest, controlling resources, and really strategic alliances, a few leaders elevated themselves above everyone else to become the Vendon, the crowned kings. These were the guys who controlled the highly lucrative, fertile agricultural plains and all the major trade routes. We're talking about incredibly formidable leaders here. Take the mighty Chola king Karakalan, or the incredibly powerful Chera king Sengwituan. These rulers used the massive wealth generated from their lands to build enormous armies and consolidate absolute, unquestioned power. And let me tell you, these guys were absolutely not just sitting around on thrones looking pretty. They were brilliant administrators and fierce warriors. Kurikallan of the Cholas won the legendary Battle of Veni against a huge coalition, and he's famously celebrated for clearing out forests and building dams across the Kaveri River, literally revolutionizing agriculture. Then you have Singhatudvan of the Cheras, who focused heavily on the coasts, securing the seas and wiping out piracy to protect the massive wealth flowing through the port of Mazuris. And the Pandya king Nedjichikayan? He won an epic, history-defining battle at Talialonganam against a massive alliance that included the Cheras, the Cholas, and 5 Valir chieftains. Which brings us to Section 4, Landscapes, Society, and Trade. Because, someone had to fund these massive ancient armies, right? Let's look at the daily life that made it all possible. The ancient Tamils brilliantly categorized their world into 5 totally unique ecozones. It's a concept they called Tinai. It is such a fascinating way to look at geography because the landscape literally dictated your entire life. If you lived in the Karinji Mountains, boom, you were a hunter-gatherer. In the Mulai forests, your job was herding livestock. Down in the Marathon Plains, you practiced plow agriculture. The Neothal coasts were entirely dedicated to fishing and salt production. And in the arid Palai regions where farming was basically impossible, while the occupation there often turned to cattle raiding. It was this deeply interconnected society where every single zone produced something the others desperately needed. Artifacts from the Sangam era, like everyday copper coins, perfectly capture this bustling internal economy. Goods were constantly flowing between the mountains, the plains, and the coasts. And while it was mostly done through a highly organized barter system, physical currency with animal motifs was becoming increasingly common for trade. Wait, actually, we're not just talking about local trade here. This entire region was a massively connected global hub. Because of its highly strategic location connecting the east and the west via the ocean, ancient South India was pulling in staggering amounts of wealth from across the world, especially from the Roman Empire. Archaeologists have dug up massive hoards of Roman gold and silver coins alongside imported Mediterranean amphora jars and foreign glass. The Romans were essentially pouring their treasury into South India in exchange for spices, pearls, and textiles. And finally, Section 5, Unearthing the Past. Let's look at how modern science is completely turning history on its head. For decades, historians confidently placed the start of the Sangam era around 300 BCE. But wow, recent carbon dating has absolutely shattered that timeline. Charcoal samples pulled from the Kizadi excavation site have now been securely dated to 580 BCE. And it gets even more stunning. Rice husks found tucked inside burial urns at Sivagalai and Adichanallur have been carbon dated all the way back to 1155 BCE. This is literal proof of a continuous, thriving heritage that is over 3,200 years old. And the Kizadi excavations? They didn't just dig up a few broken pots. They unearthed a highly sophisticated, secular urban society. We are talking incredibly precise brick structures using a standardized 1:4:6 ratio. They found a booming textile industry, complete with weaving tools and bone brushes. They uncovered carnelian beads that had to be imported all the way from Gujarat, which shows massive internal trade networks. They even found over 600 terracotta board game pieces called Silas. I mean, this was a society with enough wealth and leisure time to just sit around and play board games. Okay, this next part is just mind-blowing. Researchers have started finding striking, undeniable similarities between the ancient, undeciphered symbols used up north in the Indus Valley civilization and the graffiti marks discovered carved right into the pottery down south at Kij Kiti. This suggests a potential cultural or even linguistic bridge spanning thousands of miles and thousands of years. Meanwhile, if we head further south to Adachanayular, archaeologists unearthed a massive, sprawling burial site. We're talking giant clay urns buried up to 12 feet deep in the earth. And inside these urns, they found high-tin bronze vessels, brutal iron weapons, and actual gold diadems. These beautiful headbands meant to be tied around the forehead of the deceased. It paints a vivid, undeniable picture of a wealthy, highly skilled, and martial society that deeply, deeply honored its dead. It really makes you stop and wonder, doesn't it? As we continue to literally unearth the past at sites like Kizadi and Adichanallur, what other incredible ancient mysteries are just waiting to be discovered right under our feet? Every single new dig site has the potential to push the timeline back even further and rewrite the history books all over again. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on ancient South India. Stay curious.